Something I do is I collect different translations, because each one of these versions of the Bible, each translation, the words are a little different, because they could be a translation off of the original. New Testament's usually in Greek, and you can get some versions are translations, modern translations done recently off of that original Greek. And then there's other translations out there that were done in the past by other people. So you might get different time period. So that means that I read in English, and English has radically changed in the last couple hundred years, since the 1500s. Radically changed. There's been new letters invented. It's been very interesting. So because of that, depending on what year it was translated, it radically changes as well what you're reading, because the style of English and the spelling used and the amount of letters that they had and vowels, etc., can be different. And sometimes it didn't go from Greek right to English. That was a big deal when that happened. It's a really big deal. I'd already gone from Greek to German. That was a very big deal when that happened. And when it went from Greek to English, England changed. Great turmoil happened, because it had gone from Greek to Latin, and then it went from Old Latin to New Latin. And that was like the standard. That's what the priest taught in England when the commoners spoke English. And the church was using Latin Bibles. And the people, if they wanted to read, not even read, but listen to Scripture, they had to go listen to the priest read that Latin book. And there was, I'm talking like Vulgate, things like that, the type of Bible they used back then. And there was some English versions that were handwritten by like Erasmus, things like that, these people. And they weren't off the original Greek though, usually. They were like always off of Latin into English, things like that. And eventually it was actually printed into English right from the original Greek by an incredible scholar, an incredible lover of the Bible. He spoke and wrote many, many languages. And he was working with Greek, he was working with English, he was working with German, he was working with Aramaic. He just knew a ton. He knew Latin, I believe. He knew, and that's 5 right there. And so this man named Tyndale, he made a version of the Bible that was very special. It wasn't a version, it was really a translation. It was a brand new translation. A version is usually a translation that is like a new version of that one, an edited version, where they take a Bible, a translation that already exists, and they edit it and they republish it. That's a version. This was a brand new translation from the original Greek right into English. That was a big deal. Because now the commoner in England could read scripture for themselves. They could dive in. He ended up being killed for doing that. He never finished. He made his New Testament. I believe it was 1525 was the first translation, first time he published it. And he was working on the Old Testament. He learned Aramaic so he could translate books in the Old Testament. I think he ended up doing 11 or 12 books. He was really cranking along. And he ended up being caught and killed before he could finish. And what happened was that his friends took his work that he had gotten up to that point, and then they took pieces of other people's work, like from the Latin, on the books that he didn't get for the Old Testament. They put that into English, and they called it like a new book. I think that was the Coverdale Bible, and that was a big deal. They had to print it in another country in English. They couldn't print it in England. Anyways, I really like that stuff. I really like tracking down these versions and these translations from different time periods. And they're incredible. So this is just another version. This is a version that is actually a modern version, an edited version of the King James, and it's an edited version of the Baskerville edit of the King James. Most people think they have a King James, which I think it was I forget the first edition year right now. It was like 1611 or something like that. I forget. But usually today, when you buy a King James, it's not the first edition. It's not the 1611. You think it is, but it's not. Look it up. Look inside. Check it out. It won't say that year on it. The first editions, the real King James, are a lot harder to find. The Baskerville version of it was many years later. It was like 1699, something like that. So I find that stuff interesting. So this is a later version of that. So that's like the tree, the stem. It just keeps going forward. So I know where this stands, how many times it's been edited from the original. I mean, every time it's been edited, things have been changed from the original translation that it started with. Whether or not they think they're cleaning it up and make it easier to read, it's irrelevant. It wasn't what that first person sat down and had those two languages. And he had the original, and he said, okay, that means this. Then later on, they say, okay, well, we're just going to clean that up. So we'll start with here, we'll put the original language away. Now we have the translation language. Now we're just going to clean it up a little bit. And you get the second generation. It keeps going. New versions, new versions. So this isn't my preferred version, but it's a waterproof version. And that's pretty cool. So at least it's waterproof. Well, I really like collecting different years. I have a Tyndale. I think it's a 1529, something like that, 1530. I have a Baskerville version of the King James. I have a modern retranslation from all the original languages that was done like 15 years ago, something like that, 2001 or something. Yeah, I really enjoy kind of delving in to the different versions, translations of all my favorite scriptures because the wording is a little different.